So welcome to Waterway 8. We're going to talk about delivering your Xamarin app on time and on budget. My name is Robin Schroeder, and my Twitter handle is RT Schroeder. Yes? Okay. I kind of lost my voice last night because the bar was very loud. Better? Cool. Sponsors. So here's my why are you qualified to talk to me about this slide. I like to build stuff. I've been coding since 1998 in all kinds of different languages. And then in 2008, I switched to the Microsoft stack because I married a Microsoft developer. In 2015, I started Xamarin University, and I really fell in love with it. I'm also qualified to talk to you about this because I have lifetime chronic nightmares about being late, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about ways to not make my projects late. And I also have a disclosure here. I have no affiliation to any of the specific products that I mentioned in this talk. I work at a small consulting company. Our office is in a makerspace, which is really, really awesome. I play guitar, and I'm also the happy instructor of Fox Valley Girls Coding Club. So on Friday nights, we eat candy and write Python code with high school girls. And it's a lot of fun. I would suggest that. So what am I going to talk about? Basically, I'm going to put this in two sections. First, we're going to review some research on software delivery. And then I have 25 specific tips on resolving some of the problems that come out of the research. So let's get the depressing stuff out of the way. Sorry in advance. One of the best examples of the worst clickbait that you could ever see is this Genica or Jenica. I don't really know how to pronounce them, but they're a software consulting company out of Illinois that basically did a survey, and these are their exact bullet points. So if you saw this on Twitter or on Instagram, you probably saw 75% of software projects will fail is the title of their article. It's worth a read. It's kind of interesting and depressing at the same time. But it kind of highlights some things that probably a lot of you guys can mimic in your own daily lives, unfortunately. I'm not going to go through every broken, awful statistic here, but basically the highlight is that 75% of respondents admit that their projects are either always or usually doomed right from the start. So it's rough. One of the most popular reports to look at why software projects specifically fail has to do with a group called the Standish Group. So every year they publish what's called the Chaos Report. I'm going to be using the 2015 version here because it's free, so you can go online and read it. The 2016, 17, 18, and probably the 19 version right now are not free. So if you are a large company and you want to pay for those reports and then review them, you can. However, the 2015 is freely available, so you can read the details on each one of these particular weighted statistics. But basically, the Standish Report takes a large survey of a lot of leadership, people in high leadership positions inside of large companies, and talks to them about why they thought their software projects failed, and specifically what things caused them to fail and what things they could have done better or whatnot. They analyze all of those things and put together this list of top 10 factors of success, and then they weight them. And then they determine that based on the weights, this amount of investment, so this percentage of investment should go into your project planning so that you have a better chance of success. So the top 4 here, if you can't read them from the back, it's executive sponsorship makes up 15% of what they suggest you should invest in. Emotional maturity, which is so ambiguous, 15% of your investment. User involvement, 15%. Optimization, which is kind of ambiguous as well, and we'll talk about that a lot, 15%. Skilled resources, which is right up our alley, 10%, as developers, up our alley. A standard architecture, 8%. Agile process, 7%. A modest execution, which means your project has a relatively decent size, 6%. Not too big, not too small, modest execution. Project management expertise at 5%, and clear business objectives come in at 4%. So for the purposes of this talk, I've taken those 10 factors of success and grouped them into 3 buckets, and then took 25 different tips for delivering Xamarin projects and grouped them into the 3 buckets. So I'm corresponding the problems with the solutions, basically. So we're going to cover 25 ways to make it better. The first group of problems and solutions have to do with these 3 sections of the Standish report. 15% of the problem that they've identified has to do with executive sponsorship, 15% in user involvement, and 4% in clear business objectives. So I'm calling this communication problems, basically. And the first 4 tips have to do with communicating better with stakeholders and users and people on your own team. So who's on the team, right? First of all, you can write software all day long as an indie developer, right? It's you and the users. You're the developer, those are the users, they're going to use it. Maybe even you could even have one more where you're the developer and you're the user. So those are always fun projects to do because you're just writing software for yourself. In a little bit of a more broken out scenario, you've got stakeholder, a developer, and a user. And more of an enterprise environment, you'd have a stakeholder, which would be your C-level, project managers, and business analysts. And then a layer of developers, some quality assurance, and then users. So that kind of gives you an idea of what most projects usually look like, the stratigraphy of the team. So tip number 1, and this is probably the most important thing. Every time I do this on a project, things tend to work out pretty well. That is, make weekly progress videos and screen caps. And this sounds like a lot of work, and this is stupid, and I don't want to do it. I should be writing code. I shouldn't have to be doing this, right? So that's what you're kind of thinking. But if you make progress videos as you go, as you write your code, and you create a area inside, so most teams talk via Slack, Teams, Discord, or something similar. If you make a separate channel for your videos, and then you upload them as you're writing code, you are basically creating kind of a visual diary of your project. And you can invite your C-level people, your stakeholders, your business analysts, whomever on your team, to go log into that little diary and take a look at those little videos. This I've found is very powerful because most C-level people are stuck in meetings all day and you want to develop all day. And so in order to have this kind of time when you can communicate with one another, you're basically giving them the ability to view, review, talk about, think about your videos anytime they want. They can also comment in this kind of a scenario in Slack, Teams, or Discord. They can comment right in line, and you can create a conversation where a conversation needs to happen about requirements that you may or may not have. This is the number 1 tip for a reason. I find that you get the most bang for your buck when you make little progress videos. You've seen in lots of the presentations, people use Visor or Reflector. Those are the 2 tools for making up the videos. They're not that hard to do once you get in the habit of it. Every time you do a big commit, every time maybe you merge, you make a little video and pop it into your Discord or Slack. Very powerful. Number 2, don't write any code ever without a mock-up. And by a mock-up, I don't mean a high fidelity, beautiful, graphic designer created mock-up. I'm talking about a low fidelity, not quite back of the napkin, but a quick low fidelity mock-up that's made with a tool that's simple to use. I like to use Balsamiq. You could also do whiteboard drawings and then take pictures of them. Balsamiq is pretty useful in that it makes everyone on your team understand that this is not a finished product, that this is not a screen capture, that this is a drawing. And so everybody, including stakeholders, understand that this is just a conceptual idea. It's not set in stone. It's very valuable. Also, I think one of the most important things here is when you, especially as a consultant, when you get plopped into a client who hasn't done any work in creating requirements, and you kind of come in and you get this very high level description of what the client wants to do. If you start sitting down and acting as a BA collecting requirements, you usually get a lot of pushback. If you sit down and start doing Balsamiq mockups, all of a sudden you get they're drawn in to your mockups, and you don't get that pushback that you're wasting time. Because a mock-up speaks 1,000 words. I think it really creates conversations where conversations need to happen about requirements. Number 3, make and use a must-know list. So this is my must-know list. I know it's a kind of a weird term, but when I go into a client and they kind of give me this high-level idea of what they want to build, typically we dig into those details, and then I take this list out and specifically make sure that I ask each and every one of these things, because these are the things that affect your general architecture. So if you're asking, 3 weeks into the project, oh, did you guys want to convert this to, you also want to deliver this to Spanish users, or perhaps Portuguese, or maybe Polish? That's a requirement that I need to know on day 1, not on day 3 weeks into the project. I need to know that right up front. And so to ask all of these things that are going to affect your architecture is super important to do. And if I didn't have a list going in, I may miss some of them. So by making a list and going in on day 1 with that list, it's really helpful and it avoids delays. Number 4, and this is my most long-winded, but it's also super important, and that is in my last 2 projects, I did an early UAT. So UAT is user acceptance testing. How many of your projects have you guys ever done with user acceptance testing? Okay. A lot of times with UAT, you do UAT oftentimes after QA. And that's kind of the traditional place to put it in the pipeline. So you develop a bunch of software, you get it through QA, and then you send it to UAT. If anything's wrong in UAT, you have to send it right back to the devs. The devs get it to QA, and QA gets it to UAT. So I use kind of a dependency injection pattern here to create a sample data only UAT version of the app. And then I give stakeholders a QA device with this version of it. And basically it gets them involved. Oftentimes the stakeholders will bring that device to meetings, show their fellow stakeholders or their fellow C-level people the app. It starts to get a lot of excitement about your app within the organization. And that number 1 thing on the Standish report, the number 1 reason why projects fail is stakeholder buy-in, basically. And so by giving your stakeholders the tools that they need to basically be your advocate throughout this large organization that you work in, is extremely powerful. So I'm going to go through a couple of the technical ways to set this up, but I found this to be a really good pattern. Basically, the way that I describe it to them when I go in is that we're going to set the table. We're going to create the UI together and make sure that it does everything that you need to do. And then I'm going to put a bunch of sample data in, which is going to create this tablecloth underneath. And then while you're figuring out and making sure with your early UAT version of the application, making sure that all the forks and knives and wine bottle and the vase are all perfectly laid out on the table, and it's exactly what you want, I'm going to be building my second tablecloth, which is the API layer, which is all the middle layer that's going to feed the actual data into the app. And then I'm going to basically rip the tablecloth out from underneath your table setting, and everything's going to stay just put exactly the way you liked it. And then we're going to have an API layer. So we're basically kind of dividing and conquering, right? I'm giving them one version of the UI, and I'm taking the other one and building out a different basically layer underneath. So the first step to this is to invest in a fair amount of sample data. I usually do 2 or 3 versions of sample data to kind of give some examples of different scenarios that could happen with the underlying data. This is especially even more useful with the announcement that we had from Maddie this yesterday morning about how design time data is now going to be useful inside of Xamarin.Forms. So this has yet another use. So not making sample data is a waste of time. Like, just make sample data. If you use any code generation in your pipeline, we use a lot of code generation because we're a small shop. I just tend to generate this based off of the models and then change a couple strings and numbers in order to meet the scenarios that I want to basically test or allow my my stakeholders to play around with in their version. I always use fictional character names, dead presidents, cartoon characters, movie stars, and again, driving home the point that the back end is not wired up and not complete. You never want to give them the idea that the application is done when it's not done. It just sets unreasonable expectations and makes life really hard for you. So the second part of that is to make sure that you're using dependency injection to kind of bifurcate the data loading and the data store. So if we took a very vanilla Xamarin.Forms app that right from the template, so in this case I used the shell template right out of the box in Visual Studio 2019. In the shell template, you've got an iData Store interface and then an Azure Data Store and a mock data store. So they're kind of doing this pattern already. And so in order to kind of implement the pattern that I'm talking about, I split the Azure Data Store into a loader. So I split this interface and created a loader. That loader is then loading up my SQLite storage in the back end. So I've got an Azure Data Loader, a mock data loader, and then my SQL Data Store, which is where the persistent storage layer is. And in practice, if I was building an enterprise application and I was using this kind of pattern, I would probably break it down a little bit more. So we have in the GitHub repo for the conference, I have an example of this that's working, where basically if I'm loading the sample data store, then I'm loading these services. They're all singletons. So these are all getting loaded as singleton for the data store, the data loader, and the data uploader. So that's when the data goes back up to Azure. And then if I was loading it from the API, then I would be loading this set of services. So it's just a bifurcation with the dependency injection engine. This is I use the core one. So that's the newer one that kind of if you watched there's a video of James doing it with like kind of implementing this pattern from Build just recently. So kind of to visualize the comparison here. In previous situations where you have this pattern of going from dev to QA to UAT, I feel like the stakeholders are looking through that glass window with the nursery, and they're wanting to see the app, and they see that little baby, their little baby app sitting there, and they can't do anything. They can't get a good look. They can't see, oh, do they have 10 fingers and 10 toes? They're not really getting to play with your app until very late in the process. By doing an early UAT pattern, you're giving them the ability to not only use it for themselves, but you're also giving them the ability to share it with their fellow C-level people. So it levels expectations. It works really, really well. So again, if you want to take a look at it, it's inside of the speaker get repo. And I just have a button on that home page. It logs the sample user out, dumps the SQLite database, and then loads it back up with either the API data or sample data, whichever button you push. So that's tip number 4. We got 21 more. So second, I'll go fast, all right? The rest of them are more simple. So the second section from the Standish report has 3 different categories here. It's about 32% of their weighted problem. 15% emotional maturity, 10% skilled developers, and 8% standard architecture. So this is our bread and butter. This is us. Who's a developer in here? All of us, yes. So unfortunately, 32% of the problem, according to Standish, is us. Number 5, I use this probably 10 times a day. The pulse of software development is on Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, you're in luck, because you can create one and it will be nice and clean, and you can only put technical people in there and only follow technical things. I have learned more on Twitter than anywhere else ever. I usually spend about 5 to 10 minutes daily. I go through the Twitter stream. I will look through Twitter really quick to see if anybody has problems before I do like an update of Visual Studio. I just make it a habit. I use this Microsoft To Do mobile app. It actually has a widget that goes kind of on your Android desktop of your phone. So this is my phone. And it allows you to knock things off your list. It syncs to Outlook so that if you want to go look something up on your laptop, you can. And then you have kind of this to-do list that's anywhere you want, or on a tablet or whatever. So it's super useful. So what I do is that if I'm on Twitter, I see a blog I want to go look at, I copy and paste the link to the blog into my to-do list, and then the next time I have 15 minutes, maybe I'm waiting for my kids coming out of karate class or something, then I do a little bit of more research on that, whatever the thing was on my list. As mobile developers, we have to keep up, and it's hard. There's lots of things happening all the time. So doing something like this and just making a habit of it it keeps you on your toes as a developer. The other thing too, so this is kind of fun. A lot of times I'll take things on my to-do list and I'll dream up a pet project app for myself to build. And so typically I like to build libraries that I've never used. I have given myself permission that it's okay to fork it and play around with new things. It's not a waste of time. It's okay if it never goes to the store and it only lives on my personal device. And it gives you something to practice on, to blog about, to talk about at interviews. It's really valuable. Also, if you have forgotten how much fun it is to be a developer and you have lost your love for writing cool code, this is a great way to get it back. So here's an app that I wrote and the stars rotate, and basically, so I was sitting in a meeting a little while ago, a couple months ago, and everything was just failing. So, our web connect was failing and people weren't showing up, and, the sky was falling basically. And someone looked up and said, "Is Mercury in retrograde?" And everyone went, "Oh, maybe, I don't know." So we had to Google it, and sure enough, Mercury was in retrograde. So then I was like, well, if Mercury in retrograde can affect this meeting, then I need to write an app that reminds me when Mercury's in retrograde, because this could be a disaster. So I did, and I used Skia Sharp to rotate the stars, which was fun. And I did ads, which I had never done, Google Mob ads. So, and it's in shell as well. So there's all kinds of things that you can do. You don't have to have a deadline. You don't have to, report to a stakeholder. You can just do things on your own time. So give yourself permission. Number 7. And this one's a little bit tough, right? So cultivate your emotional maturity. As developers, I think we find solace in logic and code. I mean, that's why we're here, is that it's a very comfortable environment to interact with a computer. That's what we enjoy. Unfortunately, that's not how you write good software. Good software involves lots of people. And making sure that the software is written to meet the needs of a business process requires that we interact with lots of people. So this emotional maturity, according to Standish, the Standish report, is 15% of why projects fail. And so, of course, I had to Google it and figure out, okay, well, what's the difference between emotional maturity and emotional intelligence? So these are buzzwords that are going around right now. I would encourage you to Google it as well, so it's kind of an interesting thing. Basically, it boils down to the idea that everyone needs to stop and think what it must feel like to be that other person. That's pretty much what it boils down to. And if you do that and try to practice doing that, then basically you're practicing your emotional maturity skills. So before you freak out because your requirements have changed, before you freak out when the deadlines have been moved on you, just stop. Think about how everyone else in the pipeline or how everyone else must feel. It's complicated, basically. Number 8, and I watch junior developers do this a lot, don't set yourself up for failure. Try to fight your natural innate excitement for solving problems. Just because you can solve a problem doesn't mean you should. So this comes up pretty often when someone comes to your development team with a problem, and you can think of 25 ways to solve it technically. I could write this code. We could do this. We could put this hook over here, and then put this over here, and then this can follow. But should you fix it with technology? Are you just covering up for a bad business process that needs to be fixed within your business? So before you solve something with technology, stop and think. This is a huge time sink, in my opinion. This is oftentimes what makes or breaks a project. If the developers can do something, it doesn't always mean that you should do it. So stop and think about that. Number 9, celebrate your successes. I know, this is so cliche, right? This is way more important than you may think it is. So sometimes when I lead teams, or even when I'm on teams, or however, I do a lot of staff augmentation. So sometimes I'm in charge, sometimes I'm the sous chef, sometimes I'm alone. I like to make sure that my team or myself celebrates my success, celebrates your success as a team. Even if it's just, how many of you have written an app and at some point during the development process, all of a sudden you have to turn on the DEX, what's called the DEX index or whatever, where you have to click the switch inside of your Xamarin, or inside of your Android app. And like one build, it was fine, and the next build, all of a sudden you have to turn the max DEX on, right? And it kind of feels like your app's growing up. You're like, oh, my kid has graduated from 2nd grade to 3rd grade now. Stop. Celebrate that. That's a little celebration. Like, hey, we got to the point where we have over 6,400 methods inside of or however many it is, 64,000. So it's a good thing to do, to stop and say, hey, we're getting somewhere, let's keep going. It doesn't have to be the end or beginning of a sprint, but it's super important to celebrate your successes. The 3rd section, according to the standards report, has to do with optimization. A lot of this has to do with avoiding delays in the development cycle. So they cite optimization as 15% of the problem, agile process 7%, or these are kind of the estimate of how much you should invest in each one of these things to increase the risk, or to decrease the risk of a project failing. Modest execution, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then project management expertise. So that may or may not fall into something that we can modify. So about 33% of the problem has to do with this category. So Donovan Brown, sorry, I kind of yelled it right there. Donovan Brown couldn't have said it better this morning. He kind of was a lot more aggressive about it. Not aggressive, but passionate about it. But if you set up your CI pipeline, your analytics and crash reporting on day 1, you are going to collect a lot of great data, and you will be able to move forward in a much better way. So a lot of times I see teams wait to set this stuff up. If you set up especially your CI pipeline on day 1, then basically you're setting up your CI pipeline to build an empty solution, basically, with just your bare bones template, and you'll get it working much faster if you do it on day 1. And then you'll figure out which build broke it. I added this library, now my build is broken in my CI pipeline. Now I know at least somewhere between point A and point B, right? This chunk, these 5 commits, somewhere in that area it broke. And so it's much easier to figure out what happened to break your build when you set it up on day 1. Also, these little badges that come in App Center are super valuable, because you can see then how each one of your builds is passing or failing really, really quickly without having to click around. It also gives you an indication of if any of the developers on your team are spinning, and then you can try to go and get them unstuck, especially if they're remote. So this also allows you to then create meaningful analytics. So this is pretty important as well. We can collect analytics all day long, but if they're not meaningful, then it doesn't matter that we collected them. It was just a waste of time. So how many of you guys use App Center? App Center is great. If you want, I'm totally off the subject now, but I have these Mobile Center stickers. So remember when it used to be called Mobile Center? Like collector's edition Mobile Center stickers. I have a couple if you want some. They're kind of cool. Anyway, nobody really remembers anymore, but it's rad, at least to me. So here's an example of a track event. And this one's called, I pass the string successful login, and then I make a dictionary here. And I pass user and then the user email. When I am looking at this in App Center, then I've got my successful login here. It very quickly is able to give me a graph of how many times I had a successful login event. And then I'm able to see down here, okay, these are all the users that have logged in and the number of times. If I had taken this user email and put it inside of this string here, successful login, and then concatenated the email address at the end, I would have garbage here, and I would have nothing to see. It would be a waste of energy. So making sure that you're able to integrate meaningful analytics is super important. And again, making sure that those analytics are going in as you're writing code is also super important because you're able to track from day one what's going on. Number 11, monitor crashes. Inside of App Center, there is these two handy dandy little things. Number one is this little icon where you can write a little note. Hey, oops, sorry, this happened because I was missing a column on SQLite table, and then my initials. And also next to this handy dandy little button is another handy dandy little drop-down menu that's allowing you to mark each one of these crashes as open, closed, or ignored. I use this all the time because sometimes crashes can repeat. Sometimes you'll be able to cause the same crash with a different scenario. And you can very quickly have kind of a little diary of the times that your app crashed. So this is a super, super important feature that's already there. It's free, and you should use it. It saves a lot of time. So crashes often also involve multiple developers, and that wastes a lot of time for multiple developers. So using this type of stuff is important. Whenever I'm on a team, I always am kind of picky that everybody uses an extension called CodeMade. CodeMade auto-organizes and it auto-cleans and auto-reorganizes each one of your code files on save, and this reduces merge conflicts. So merge conflicts are one of the biggest sinks of time ever. And so to avoid them is fabulous. So basically, CodeMade out of the box alphabetizes the members of the same group. So all of your methods get alphabetized. There are some settings, but typically I just use the out of the box settings. And then everybody that comes on the team has to install CodeMade. It's really a very quick check. When you have a developer that doesn't have CodeMade turned on, then everybody knows it because you end up having merge conflicts or at least sticky merges. You know, merges where, wait, we lost that somewhere. Oh, how did we lose it? And then we have to go back in history. It's a waste of time. So using CodeMade helps a lot alleviate some of those problems. Number 13, identifying the hard parts and time boxing your proof of concepts. How am I doing? Oh my, I'm on 13. So everybody knows what a proof of concept is. It's when you just write a little bit of code. When you time box your proof of concepts, you're basically using a set amount of time to go and write a proof of concept. That's super important, and having the discipline to do this so that you're not spinning by yourself is crucially important. Lots of value. Number 14, build an MVP, a minimum viable product with good bones. Never count on being able to go back and rework your MVP. If it's your MVP, that's not a proof of concept. A proof of concept is something you're going to probably learn from and throw away. An MVP is a very early larval version of your app. Number 15, try to push the business rules back in your architecture. Try to get your business rules out of your view models. I know it's hard, but as we move into an environment where we have things like the Uno platform and WASM, we're going to be able to share business rules with Xamarin, our Xamarin apps, our APIs, and now those web component, because we're going to be writing them in C#. If you push your business rules back in your architectures, you're going to be able to reuse them in all kinds of different places. Get in the habit of doing this now, and it's going to save you a lot of time. Number 16, battle context switching. Do you know what context switching is? Where we're changing projects every 5 minutes. So I've kind of divided this into two. Try to reduce how often you context switch. It's hard to do. Second, try to figure out the most graceful way to recover when you are disrupted, because you're going to get disrupted. The way that I do it the most, and I'm very auditory, but I tend to listen to the same type of music, or actually the same album, or sometimes even the same song on repeat. And then when I come back to that piece of code or that project, I put that song back on. And all of a sudden, my brain remembers what I was doing. It is the stupid and weirdest thing ever. You guys can all laugh at me privately, but it works. It may work for you, so I'm just throwing it out there. Oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Sorry, I'm like yelling into this thing. No, and I have like specific songs for different projects. Expect that you're going to have Apple developer membership delays. You're going to have them in two major places: when the initial legal agreements are signed, and then when you update a license agreement, it's going to stop your development team in their tracks. So just know this is happening. It's going to happen. iTunes submission. How many of you are frustrated with your iTunes submission? Oh, I'm not alone. I think that they're allergic to approving an app on the first try. Has anybody gotten one through on the first try? Anyone? Have you really? Was it a long time ago? Yeah? Was it Monday? You got one through on the first try on Monday? No way. Wow. I'm impressed. We should chat. I've never happened to me ever. In fact, lately, I did 2 MVPs in 2019. Both of them were, basically sent back to me because I didn't have enough functionality. I was like, it's an MVP. That's why we call it MVP, minimum viable. Anyway, just know there's going to be delays related to this, and schedule for them. Understand them. Know that it's going to take a while to get through. Who uses the Visual Studio built-in task list? Please, everyone raise your hand. Yes, please. You can actually configure. So if you, in your code, if you do // TODO and then a colon, all of those items end up in this task list. And all you do is go, let's see, inside of the options menu, you choose task list or Control WT, and you can pull up this list. This is fabulous for leaving yourself a little message, and then before you go to production or to QA or whatever, reviewing this list and making sure that there's no, things that you haven't touched. You can also make your own, so everyone on your team can have their own token. Super valuable and built in. Yes, it's also on the Mac. First 10, last 10. So I have this rule. I have a notebook next to my keyboard. When something pops in my head, I don't want to distract myself from coding, so I jot it down in my notebook, and I spend the first 10 and the last 10 minutes of the day reviewing that notebook. At the beginning and end of each sprint, I clear my notebook to make sure that everything on the notebook has been cleared, has been resolved or addressed. I use a Rocketbook. If you haven't used a Rocketbook, you should Google it. They're pretty rad. They're erasable, and you can scan them. There's an app that goes right into your, into wherever you can direct it to Dropbox or iDrive or whatever, or email, or you can send it via your phone, so it's pretty rad. Number 21, avoid late summer public releases. We probably all know about this. Android and iOS are going to throw us a curveball, whether it's a new bezel or it's a change in location device permissions or it's authentication with facial recognition. You're going to get a curveball in late summer. And so just to understand it and know it's coming and give yourself a little bit of time, or just avoid late summer public releases altogether. 22, keep your build numbers in sync. So this doesn't happen super often, but I have seen teams do this. Particularly, they don't have their iOS, UWP, or Android versions in sync, which is really hard to track. And then sometimes what people will do is use Azure DevOps or TFS, and they'll have right here, a CI/CD script to increment the build, and then the version number never gets back into source control, and they don't know how to make a hotfix. Make sure that you are completely ready to make a hotfix at any time. I think that's probably the worst. It's the one time that you need to be organized and ready to go, and it's oftentimes the time that you're not ready to go is when you've kind of botched up your build numbers. 23, if you're sleeping right now, please knock your neighbor gently because this is really cool. I might even make a blog post. Use the golden ratio. So the golden ratio is a ratio that artists use to make things pleasing to the eye. I'm not a graphic designer, and none of us are. And so by using something that's already built into XAML, which is this ratio type way to set the width and the length of the grid, you're able to mimic this pattern as like artists do. And we can actually get it down to, the tenths, hundredths here, by saying, hey, the height of this is 1 and the height of this is 1.618. Otherwise, you can split up your grids by 5-star, 8-star, or 3, 3, 2, 8, or something like that. This pattern, this shape is extremely pleasing to the eye. And if you don't believe me, try it. I've done it a number of times. People just look at your app and they go, wow, that looks great. And they don't know why. Cool. The times I've used this, it's worked out really well. And it's just magic. It is just, you're tricking humans' eyeballs to like your stuff. So, good stuff. Number 24, choose your plugins wisely. I probably don't have to tell you this. Review the plugins that you're going to use. How often do they release an update? Browse their knowledge base. Make sure that this is worth your investment in time. I love people putting open source things up there, but if I'm working for a big corporate client, I don't want to have to be crazy and have to find solutions to problems in NuGet packages that I can't get in and update myself because they belong to someone else. 25, synchronize your environment updates. Understand that everyone on your team should be using the exact same version of Visual Studio and/or VS for Mac. Discuss and plan your updates to different NuGet packages, and then devote one day every 4 to 6 weeks to updates and smoke testing. Usually the first day of a sprint. When you make release builds, do it with the linker on to test all the updates on all your platforms. Do that on a regular basis so you don't get to the end and you're like, oh crap, the linker doesn't work. Oh, it's this plugin that we invested a bunch of time and energy in using that's not linker safe. Take notes so you don't repeat the same version combination. This used to be a bigger problem than it is now. It's a little bit better now. And just understand this is a long process for Mac and OS. It's going to take a few hours to update all of your devices. It's going to take a few hours to update everything. And that is it. We got through it. I hope I'm not too far over. Anyone? Did I talk too fast? Go ahead.
So do you have any issues with clients and their rules about licensing?
Licensing, oh, like third-party NuGet packages?
Like they only want MIT or...
Sometimes. Banks sometimes have that problem where they don't want to have third-party, things, and you kind of just write it from scratch. I used to do a lot of Windows 8.1 development. I know, I'm sorry if that hurt your ears. But in Windows 8.1, I had a client that didn't want any third party at all. And so we wrote everything in-house, and it actually worked out really well because Windows 8.1, they're still using it, and they're able to. And there's no support for some of those libraries that, have now gone on, and there's perfectly happily. He had a,
White source.
yeah.
That was interesting.
I have a note to myself in my application to go look at that because he had like a scanner that would go through and look at all the licenses to all of your NuGet packages and then determine if you were in violation because you had, implemented or used something that had a license that would not allow you to do that and, for financial gain or whatever. So some legal ramifications. So yeah, that was cool. I gotta hook something like that up. See how it works. Yep. Number 21. Oh, wow. I don't know what number 21 was. Avoid late summer public releases. Did you really take a picture of all of them? Oh. I did. Because, this is common. There's all kinds of people that talk about this. And it's because they both they do all of their announcements. So the betas will come out in like July. And then come August, it's kind of like a realization, and you got to either you can't fall behind in mobile, you just can't because of this type of thing. You got to go with the flow.
Do you have any other pictures of the golden ratio, like images?
I could Google it real fast if you want to. It's if you've ever seen the Nautilus shell picture, which is kind of a common. And no. There's some action needed, apparently. Some required action. I don't know what my access codes are. Anyway, the very classic picture is this Nautilus shell that has kind of the scrolly shape. And so, honestly, like, it's magic. I don't know really how it happens, but this shape right here kind of has a Nautilus shell. You can kind of see it's magic. So you should use it. And the cool part about it is that XAML is set up to do it every which way from Sunday. So it's a cool little trick. Anybody else? Oh, that's my alarm.